For this week's bagel making adventure, I made the New York Times Baron Bagel recipe. The Baron Bagel recipe, right? For this recipe, we need 5 cups of flour, 1 tablespoon of diastatic malt powder, 3 tablespoons of sea salt, 2 tablespoons of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of active dry yeast, and then my secret ingredient, which was vital wheat gluten, to add a little bit of extra chew to the bagel. I want them chewy. Also, if this is your first time to my channel, please like and subscribe. I make bagels every single week, a different recipe every single week, and I'd love to share my bagel making adventure with you. Should we start making these bagels? Let's do this. This recipe calls for the use of a stand mixer, so I'm busting out my handy dandy KitchenAid. Okay, in goes the 5 cups of flour. Now our 1 tablespoon of diastatic malt powder. I'm going to proof my yeast in the 1 2/3 cups of lukewarm water that we'll need for the dough. Oh yeah, look at that. The yeast is looking crazy active. I'm going to go ahead and dump it in. Now in goes our tablespoon of salt. Now in goes my secret ingredient of 2 tablespoons of vital wheat gluten. Now this is not called for in the official recipe and is just me having some fun, so feel free to leave it out. But from what I've read, adding some vital wheat gluten will give the bagels a lot more chew. It'll make them a lot chewier. But this could also make them too chewy. There's only one way to find out. Okay, let your stand mixer run on low for 5 minutes. If you don't have a stand mixer and you're kneading by hand, double that time and knead it for 10 minutes. Now here's our dough. Now the recipe wants us to let it rest covered for 2 hours. Nice! That's a great rise. Now I'm going to punch down the dough and remove it from the bowl. Maybe you're all, Jason, I'm non-violent. I don't like to punch down dough. The reason we punch down the dough is to release gas bubbles that are formed by the yeast during the rising process. This produces a finer grain. It also redistributes the yeast cells so they can ferment and rise the dough during the proofing stage. This relaxes the gluten and makes the dough easier to roll out and shape. Now let's shape the dough into a rough rectangle about 1 to 1.5 inches thick and about 2 times longer than it is wide. You know, a rectangle. If you're having trouble forming the dough, stretch it, wait for the gluten to relax, and then reform it. Now cut the dough into 10 pieces, about 3 ounces each. Obviously, I'm eyeballing this, trying my best to get them all pretty equal. I'm going to try a couple of different methods to shape the bagels. Method 1 will be wrapping it around my hand and rolling it out into the bagel shape. Method 2 is going to be this dough ball method that I've seen a few people do, where you hold the dough under your hand and you move your hand back and forth on your cutting board to form a perfect dough ball, and then you poke your hole through there. I just want to see which one works best for me. These are going to be some great bagels, I could just tell. Now we're just going to cover it up with a towel and put it in the refrigerator for 10 to 24 hours. Mine ended up being in the refrigerator for about 13.5 hours. These bagels are looking good. It's been 13.5 hours, and the shapes of the bagels look really good. You can tell which ones I rolled out in the long snake fashion wrapped around my hand and which ones I used the dough ball method. Both look great. I think I kind of prefer the dough ball method, but whatever. Let's get to boiling bagels. Okay, I'm preheating my oven to 425. And I'm adding the remainder of my salt and the 2 tablespoons of baking soda to the water. And I'm going to bring the water to a nice boil. And then my favorite part, in go the bagels. Carefully place just enough bagels into the pot to cover the surface of the water, making sure that there are no bagels resting on top of one another. Let them float on one side for 1 minute before flipping them over to the other side for another minute or so. Remove the bagels and drain well on a cooling rack. These bagels are looking pretty cool, so I'm going to spray them down with a little bit of water so that my everything but the bagel sesame seasoning blend will stick to the bagels while we put them in the oven and bake them. I'm also going to sprinkle on a little bit of smoked Maldon salt. just seems like it will be delicious. Alright, these bagels are heading into the oven. As you can see here, just for fun, I've decided to bake 3 of the bagels on a cast iron pan with a little bit of cornmeal on the bottom so that they don't stick. Just curious to see how they turn out. Now these guys are going to bake in here for about 25 minutes. Now look at these golden brown delicious bagels. They smell amazing and they're crispy to the touch. I cannot wait to cut into one of these guys and bite it. Oh yeah, that is a crispy, crispy bagel. Not as shiny as I wish it was, but pretty dang good. Now let's go ahead and see what this guy tastes like. I'm curious to see what the chew is like. It's delicious. That is a tasty, tasty bagel. I will say that the Vital wheat gluten added a lot of chew. It's not too much for me. It's actually pretty good. I found that after eating a whole bagel, my mouth was tired. My mouth muscles were actually getting sore. So maybe I could back off on that a little bit. It was an experiment, but I'm glad I did it. I can't wait to have these bagels for the rest of the week, and I look forward to making bagels again with you next week. I will post my next bagel recipe in the comments of this video as soon as I figure out which one I'm going to do. Or if there's one that you would like me to do, go ahead and write it in the comments and send it over to me, and I'll make those bagels for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that jive, and hit the bell notification so that you can stay up to date with all of my bagel making craziness. I'll see you next week at Everything Bagel.